The moment my aunt's fork stopped halfway to her mouth, I knew something had just shifted at that table. I didn't understand what yet. I just felt it the way you feel a car hydroplane before your brain catches up to tell you you're about to crash. My uncle had only said 7 words. 7 words. Between a sip of water and a glance at my cousin across the table. 7 words that didn't even seem addressed to anyone in particular. So, has Claire been using the fund? I set down my glass. What fund? I said. He looked at me, then at my aunt, then back at me, and something changed in his eyes, something slow and careful, the way a person's expression shifts when they realize they've walked into a room they weren't supposed to enter. The life insurance, he said. Your father's policy. I helped him set it up back in 2019, the one he left for you. I did the math in my head the way you do when you already know the answer is going to be wrong. My father died 3 years ago. A $200,000 life insurance policy left for me. I had been told there was $12,000 after debts. I put both hands flat on the table. I looked at my aunt. She had already looked away. Let me back up. My father was the kind of man who planned for everything except his own grief. He tracked his budget in a spiral notebook with color-coded ink. He kept a folder in his filing cabinet labeled, "When I'm gone, not dramatic, just practical." He paid every bill 2 weeks early and kept a 6-month emergency fund in a savings account he called the just in case. He was the only person I have ever known who actually read the fine print. He was also a single father who raised me from the time I was 9 years old, after my mother left for reasons she never fully explained to either of us. We were a team of 2 in a small house in Raleigh, and we made it work. I got into college on a partial scholarship, and he helped with the rest. I graduated with a degree in communications, got a job as a content writer at a small marketing firm, and moved into my own apartment at 24, feeling like we had both finally exhaled. He was diagnosed 8 months later. It moved fast. That's what the doctors kept saying, like speed was a comfort. It moved fast. By the time they named it, it had already named him. He spent the last 4 months at home, in the bedroom I grew up sleeping down the hall from, and I moved back in to help. His older sister, my aunt, lived 40 minutes away. She came by on weekends. She brought casseroles and opinions and a particular way of sighing that made every room feel smaller. Her husband barely spoke to me but smiled a lot in a way that showed too many teeth. My father tolerated them with the patient exhaustion of someone who had been tolerating them for 60 years. When my father died, I was 26. I was the only one in the room. It was a Tuesday morning in March, still dark out, and he held my hand and then he didn't. I won't describe the weeks after that. Some things don't fit into sentences. What I will tell you is that my aunt arrived at the house the following afternoon with a rolling suitcase, a legal pad, and the energy of someone who had been waiting. She explained, with great efficiency, that since I was clearly not in a position to manage the estate on my own, she would help me navigate the paperwork. She said this while already sitting at my father's desk, already pulling open the filing cabinet. I was 26 years old, 48 hours past the worst moment of my life, and I said, okay. That was my mistake. Not the only one, but the first one. She handled everything. She contacted the insurance company. She spoke to the estate attorney. She gathered the documents. 2 weeks after the funeral, she sat across from me in her kitchen and slid a piece of paper across the table. After the debts were settled, she said, there was about $12,000 left. I stared at the paper. It had numbers on it. Columns of expenses, legal fees, remaining mortgage balance, medical bills insurance hadn't covered, final utility accounts, everything itemized and clean. $12,000, I said. I know. I'm sorry, honey. It's not what we hoped. I had never, not once, heard my father mention significant debt. But I was grieving and exhausted and 26 years old, and she had the paperwork, and I signed where she pointed and thanked her for her help. I took my $12,000, went back to my apartment, and started rebuilding. The next 3 years were fine. Not good, fine. I worked, I paid rent. I picked up freelance work on evenings and weekends, building a portfolio. I didn't go to a doctor for 14 months because my employer-sponsored plan had a deductible I couldn't comfortably hit. I didn't travel. I didn't save much. I sent a card every Christmas and showed up at the family Thanksgiving because it felt like what my father would have wanted. I did not think much about the $12,000, or the debt, or the filing cabinet. And then my father's brother drove 4 hours from Virginia to sit at my aunt's Thanksgiving table, and in the middle of passing the green beans, said 7 words that cracked the floor open beneath me. He and my father had not been close in the conventional sense. They went years between visits, traded phone calls on birthdays, shared a particular humor and a particular stubbornness that I recognized as distinctly my father's. But he had been at the funeral. He had held me by the shoulders in the parking lot of the church and told me my father was the best man he had ever known and meant every syllable. I had not seen him since. He came for Thanksgiving because my cousin had invited him, a peace offering, after years of low-grade family tension I had never fully understood. He brought a bottle of wine and a pecan pie and ate 2 plates of food and seemed genuinely delighted by everything. I liked him immediately in the way you sometimes immediately like people who remind you of someone you've lost. "The fund," he said again now, across the table, and his voice had changed. It was quieter, more careful. "Your dad called me when he was setting it up. He wanted to make sure I knew about it, in case. He was very specific that it was for you. No conditions, just for you." "There wasn't a fund," my aunt said. She said it calmly, pleasantly, even. "There was a modest policy, and after the estate expenses, there was a small disbursement to Claire. We went through everything together. The policy I helped him set up," he said, "was $200,000. My aunt smiled. "I think you may be misremembering. It was a much smaller policy. Honestly, your brother was not always great about keeping up with the premiums. I have the policy number," he said. "I have the original documents. Your brother mailed me copies in 2020 because he wanted a second set of eyes outside the immediate family. I think. I also had a conversation with an attorney 3 weeks ago," he said, "because when I called the insurance company to ask a routine question about a beneficiary update, the woman I spoke with mentioned that the policy had been paid out in full, to a joint account." The table went very quiet. My aunt's husband put down his fork. "I'd been meaning to ask you about it," my uncle said, still conversationally, "the way you discuss weather. But I thought I'd do a little more research first. I received some documents this week." He looked at me. "I brought them with me. I didn't want to do this at dinner. But you asked what fund, and I realized you don't know." My aunt stood up. "This is not the place." "Sit down," he said. "Soft. Absolute." She sat down. He reached under his chair and placed a manila envelope on the table. I have thought about that moment many times since. The silence after the envelope landed. My cousin frozen with her wine glass halfway raised. My aunt's husband staring at a spot somewhere past my right ear. My aunt with her hands folded in front of her plate, her expression doing something complicated that I did not yet have a name for. My uncle slid the envelope across to me. I opened it. Inside was the original insurance policy, dated November 2019. Beneficiary, Claire Marie Alderman. Policy value, $200,000. Behind it, a bank statement. A joint account opened in 2021, 8 months after my father's death, in the names of my aunt and her husband. Initial deposit, $188,000. Behind that, a transaction history. 3 years of regular withdrawals, home renovations, a cruise, a car payment, a kitchen remodel I had noticed the last time I visited and complimented her on. My aunt's kitchen, with its quartz countertops and farmhouse sink and the pendant lights she'd described as a little splurge, had been paid for by my father. I couldn't speak. I sat very still and read every page, and the number that kept appearing in my head was not $188,000. It was the 14 months I didn't go to the doctor, the weekend shifts I picked up to cover the gap in my rent, the trip I didn't take when my college roommate got married in Colorado because I couldn't afford the flight and told her I had a work conflict. It was the moment, 2 years ago, when my car needed new brakes and I drove it for 6 weeks, the way it was because I was doing the math on whether to fix it or make rent. That was my money. That was what my father left me. And for 3 years, I had been living like it didn't exist because I had trusted the woman across this table to handle it. "I want to explain," my aunt started. "Don't," he said. "You don't understand the full picture. There were costs involved in managing the estate. Claire was young. She needed guidance. The money needed to be overseen. There was a disbursement authorization with your signature," he said, dated 2 weeks after the funeral. Claire signed a document releasing her claim to the estate based on a settlement summary that listed $12,000 as the total value. The actual payout was more than 15 times that amount. I looked at her. I had called her when I got my first promotion. I had sat in this kitchen on holidays. I had thanked her, multiple times, for helping me through the hardest period of my life. "You told me there were debts," I said. She opened her mouth. "You sat across from me in this kitchen and you showed me a spreadsheet," I said. "And I believed you because you were his sister and I had just buried him and I didn't know what else to do." Her husband cleared his throat. "To be fair, there were legitimate expenses. The original policy is in my hand," I said. The bank statement is in my hand. What expense costs $188,000? We were managing your future, my aunt said, and her voice had shifted into something almost maternal, almost wounded. You were 26 years old. You had never managed significant money. If we had handed you $200,000 in the middle of your grief, you would have paid my rent, I said, gone to the doctor, maybe taken 1 week off of work to actually grieve. This isn't what it looks like. It looks like you took my father's life insurance money, I said. It looks like you put it in an account with your name on it and spent it over 3 years and told me it didn't exist. I paused. What does it look like to you? She was quiet. My uncle's attorney, it turned out, was very familiar with estate fraud. He had referred my uncle to a forensic accountant before Thanksgiving, which was why the manila envelope contained not just the original documents, but a full accounting of every withdrawal, cross-referenced against public records showing property improvements and registered vehicle purchases. The attorney had also explained that what had been done obtaining a beneficiary's signature on a fraudulent settlement summary, then diverting policy funds to a personal account had a name, several names, and they were the kind of names that involve law enforcement. My uncle did not call the police that night at the table. He had already done that, 2 days before Thanksgiving. What happened in the next 72 hours is difficult to describe in the order it actually occurred because it felt simultaneous. There was an attorney on the phone. There was my aunt crying in a way I did not recognize. There was her husband explaining, in increasingly circular sentences, that intentions mattered. There was a sheriff's deputy at the door on Friday morning. There were charges. There was also this. My uncle sitting at my aunt's kitchen table the morning after Thanksgiving, just the two of us, with 2 cups of coffee and the manila envelope between us. How did you know? I asked. Why did you call the insurance company? He wrapped both hands around his mug. I didn't know, he said. Your dad talked to me about that policy. He was proud of it. He was proud that he could do that for you. And when I drove down for the funeral and I saw how she moved through that house like it was already hers, I had a feeling. I couldn't have told you what it was. Just a feeling. You waited 3 years. I didn't have anything concrete, and I didn't want to put something in your head that I couldn't back up. He was quiet for a moment. I should have moved faster. I'm sorry for that. I shook my head. He looked at the envelope. Your dad was very clear, he said. No conditions. Just for you. He told me he wanted you to have enough room. Those were his words. Room. He looked up at me. Room to make choices. Room to take a risk on something you cared about. Room to make a mistake and recover from it without it breaking you. I had to press my lips together for a moment. He thought you were going to do something that mattered, my uncle said. He was absolutely sure of it. He just wanted to make sure you had enough floor beneath you. For 3 years, I had been living without the floor. I want to tell you that the legal process was fast. It wasn't. These things move the way bureaucracies move steadily, frustratingly, with paperwork at every turn. My aunt and her husband retained attorneys. There were delays. There were motions. There were moments when I sat in the office of the estate litigation attorney my uncle found for me and thought about how much simpler it would have been to never know. But that is the thing about knowing. Once you know, you can't choose not to. What I can tell you is that 16 months after that Thanksgiving, a settlement was reached. The majority of the money was recovered, not all of it, but most of it, accounting for what had been spent on things that could not be returned. My aunt and her husband entered guilty pleas to reduce charges. I won't catalog the consequences in detail. I'll only say that the court's countertops were appraised and the value factored into the final accounting. I also want to tell you something that I did not expect. About 2 months after Thanksgiving, I was going through a box of my father's things I had kept in storage since his death, things I hadn't been able to open. In the bottom of the box, wrapped in a rubber band, was a card. The envelope had my name on it in his handwriting. Inside was a birthday card, my 27th birthday, which came 6 weeks after he died. He had clearly written it in advance and set it aside. It said a lot of things. It said he was proud of me. It said he was sorry he wouldn't be there in the way he wanted to be. It said that he had tried to make sure I had what I needed. And then, near the end, in that precise, slightly cramped handwriting I have spent my whole life reading, I know you're going to be fine. I know it the way I know the things that are just true. You have never needed me to believe in you. You already believe in yourself. I just wanted to give you a little more room. Room. I sat on the floor of my apartment for a long time with that card. Here's what I have done with the money that was finally returned to me. I paid off my student loans. I got the dental work I had been postponing for 2 years. I put 6 months of expenses in savings, not because I'm afraid, but because that's what my father would have done. I put a portion into a short-term certificate of deposit while I decide what comes next. I also took 1 week off and flew to Colorado. It was 18 months late, but my college roommate did not hold it against me. We sat on a deck overlooking the mountains, and I told her the whole story, and she listened the way good people listen, without interrupting. There is one more thing I want to say. My aunt called me, once, about 3 months after the settlement. I don't know what she expected. I don't know if she expected anything. She said my name, and then she said she hoped I understood that she had genuinely believed she was doing what was best for me. I held the phone for a moment. I thought about my father at the kitchen table with his color-coded budget notebook. I thought about a life insurance policy he paid premiums on for years so that when he was gone, I would have room. I thought about the 14 months without a doctor and the 6 weeks with bad breaks and the wedding in Colorado I missed. I thought about what my uncle said at the table when my aunt tried to interrupt him, soft and absolute. I understand that's what you believe, I said, and I hung up. I don't have a clean lesson to offer you at the end of this. I don't think grief and betrayal and 3 years of quietly surviving resolve into something tidy. What I have is this. My father tried to give me something, and someone took it. And because his brother paid attention and didn't let it go, I got most of it back. Not the time. You don't get the time back, but the floor. I have the floor now. And I am, for the first time in a long time, taking up exactly as much room as I need. Where are you watching from right now? And if someone in your life has ever made a decision on your behalf without asking you, I want to hear about it in the comments. You might be surprised how many people know exactly what this feels like.